The heat is a physical presence, smelling of dust, sweat, and cheap tobacco. It presses down on the coarse burlap sack covering Alara's head, scraping her cheeks raw with every jolt of the wagon that brought her here. They tossed her up like a side of beef. She tried screaming once, days ago. That earned her a cracked rib and the quiet, chilling promise of worse. So she learned silence. Not the silence of fear, but of survival. A predator's stillness. They thought if they couldn't see her face, she'd be less human, easier to sell. Less trouble that way, one of her captors had muttered. But Alara was more than trouble. She was a wildfire smothered in dust, breath still burning in lungs no one cared to ask about. A hand yanks her, dragging her from the wagon bed onto a crude wooden platform. The crowd's jeers are a low, lazy hum. Her wrists are bound tight. The auctioneer's voice, oiled and practiced, cuts through the haze. $15, she's strong, young, perfect for fieldwork or breeding. The words twist in her gut. The bidding begins, a fast, cheap, dehumanizing ascent. 17, 20, 25. Section 1. The claim. A man near the front, smelling of stale whiskey and entitlement, calls out, "I'll take her for 30 if she's quiet." The auctioneer, a man named Silas Croft with a greasy smile, raises his gavel. The sound of its descent is the sound of her world ending for the second time. But it never lands. A voice, low and resonant as a thunderclap just over the horizon, slices through the thick air. "That's my wife." The yard falls dead silent. The flies buzzing around the horse troughs sound like roaring engines. Croft's gavel pauses midair, a stupid, impotent little hammer. "Who said that?" He barks, his composure cracking. Alara's breath catches, a painful hitch in her chest. She can't see, but every fiber of her being turns toward the source of that voice. There's a slow, deliberate shuffle of worn leather boots on dry earth. "I said," the voice repeats, closer now, each word a carefully placed stone. "Take that sack off her head. She don't belong here." Before Croft can protest, a shadow falls over her. Hands, not rough like her captors, but firm and certain, grip the burlap. A single, violent tear, light, blinding and pure, stabs into her eyes. She blinks, disoriented, the world a painful, blurry watercolor. As her vision clears, the crowd resolves into a gallery of leering, curious, and hostile faces. But one man stands apart from them, having moved from the back of the crowd to the foot of the platform. He is tall and lean, his duster coat the color of the road. His face is a mask of hard angles and sun-weathered skin, unreadable except for the cold, unadulterated rage burning in his dark eyes. It's a rage that isn't wild, but focused, controlled. It's aimed at the auctioneer, at the crowd, at the whole rotten world that put her on this block. He isn't looking at her as property. He's looking through the shame they'd tried to cloak her in. "I said," he repeats, his gaze locking onto Croft, "She's my wife." Croft laughs, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Is she? Don't seem to recognize you, mister. She's been through hell," the stranger says, his voice never rising, yet it commands the entire yard. His eyes finally shift, meeting Alara's. And in that instant, a current passes between them. A wild, inexplicable recognition, not of the face, but of the fire behind the eyes. "Doesn't change who she is to me." Alara stares at him. She has never seen this man before in her life. His name is a mystery. His motives a dark wood she cannot navigate. But his lie feels more like truth than her own name has in months. In his gaze, she sees not pity, but an echo of her own fury. It's the first time anyone has looked at her and seen a person worth fighting for. When the crowd begins to murmur, a low, ugly sound of thwarted entertainment, she does something born of pure instinct. She straightens her spine, lifts her chin, and with a voice she thought was long dead, whispers, "Yes, I'm his." The stranger's jaw sets, a flicker of something. Approval, maybe relief, in his eyes. He didn't flinch. Not when the crowd turned hostile. Not when Croft, regaining his bluster, sneered. "Papers are proof, mister. You got a marriage certificate?" The stranger, Jedediah, stands tall, his hands still and loose at his sides. That calm is more threatening than any drawn weapon. "You want papers, Croft? I'll bring you the man who forged the ones that put her here. He's in this crowd, I'd bet my soul on it. A man who deals in false bills of sale for human beings." A ripple of unease, tangible as a cold wind, passes through the buyers. This wasn't just a claim. It was an accusation. A threat that promised to unravel more than just this one sale. Jedediah's confidence was a weapon, making them all wonder what secrets he knew. Which of them might be implicated? Elara's heart hammers against her ribs, a wild drumbeat of terror, and a strange, fierce hope. He hadn't looked away from her once. Not from her bruises, not from the rope burns, not from the shame the sack had been meant to amplify. Croft, sweating now, raises his hands in a gesture of magnanimous defeat. "Fine, take her. But if you're lying, the sheriff won't be as understanding." Jedediah simply nods. He reaches into his coat, not for a gun, but for a small pouch. He tosses a few heavy coins at the ground, where they land with a final, contemptuous thud in the dust. "Consider this my last bid." He walks to her, his movements slow, deliberate. He kneels, the worn leather of his trousers creaking, and with a sharp knife, cuts the ropes at her ankles. The blade is ruthlessly efficient. As he stands, she wobbles, her legs unused to freedom. For a wild second, she thinks she might fall, but his presence is an anchor. He doesn't touch her, but his voice is low and close. "Can you walk?" She swallows hard, the dust in her throat making it difficult. "Yes." The word is a raw croak, but it's hers. "Then let's go." He steps aside, a simple, profound gesture of respect. He is not leading a rescued animal. He is making way for a woman. They walk through the crowd, which parts for them like the Red Sea. No one dares stop them. They walk past the last post of the auction yard, past the edge of the town's pretense of civilization. The silence between them is not empty, but charged with the unspoken. Out on the open trail, with the town a bad memory at her back, she finally breaks it. "You lied." He nods, his eyes on the horizon. "Yes. Why?" He stops then and turns to her. For the first time, he isn't just seeing a victim to be saved, he is seeing her. His gaze travels from her bruised face to her trembling hands, and finally to her feet, planted firmly on the earth. "Because I saw your hands shake," he says, his voice rough with an emotion she can't name. "But your knees never buckled. That means something." A shiver runs through her, one that has nothing to do with fear. It is a tremor of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in an eternity. "You don't know me," she whispers, the words feeling fragile in the vast expanse. "I don't need to," he replies, his voice a low growl of conviction. "I just needed them to stop." He turns and continues walking, the set of his shoulders a promise of protection she doesn't yet understand. The wind whips a strand of her matted hair across her face. She wants to collapse, to run, to weep. But something in her chest, a piece of her soul she thought had been ground to dust, stays upright. This man didn't ask her name. He gave her a new one, wife. And in this brutal, lawless land, that lie was the first thing that felt like freedom. Section 2. The Shelter and the Spark. He leads her down a narrow, winding trail away from the main road, a path that feels secret, forgotten. The scent of dust and burnt-out lives from the town gives way to the cleaner smell of pine and dry earth. Elara's feet ache, a dull, throbbing protest, but her mind spins with a frantic energy. She walks beside a man who lied for her, a man whose presence is a paradox, a quiet storm, a dangerous safety. That lie has steadied the ground beneath her feet more than any truth she has known for years. After an hour of a silence that feels more like a shared breath than an absence of words, he stops by a shallow, shaded stream. Cottonwood trees rustle overhead, their leaves whispering secrets to the wind. He kneels, filling a canteen with a steady, unhurried motion. Without looking at her, he asks, "You hungry?" The question hangs in the air. A test? A trap? She hesitates, her old instincts screaming caution. But looking at his back, the solid line of his shoulders, she finds a sliver of trust. She gives a single, jerky nod. He pulls 2 hard biscuits from a cloth pouch inside his duster and hands one to her without ceremony. It's dry and coarse, but it's the most satisfying thing she's ever tasted. It's food given, not thrown. As she eats, he finally asks the question she's been waiting for. "You got a name?" "Alara," she says, the name feeling foreign on her own tongue, like a word she once knew in a dream. She says it quietly, chewing on the sound as if it might vanish if spoken too loudly. "Alara what?" The question is a chasm opening at her feet. The name she was born with belongs to a girl who is gone, buried under layers of filth and fear. "I don't know anymore." That makes him look up. His face in the dappled sunlight is not kind in a soft, gentle way. It's a face carved from the harsh realities of this land. Strong, anchored, unyielding. There is a raw intensity in his eyes that both frightens and draws her in. "Then you can borrow mine for a while. It's Ward. Jedediah Ward." He blinks. He offers his name like a shield. "You risked everything," she says, the words pushing past the lump in her throat. "Why did you really do it?" Jedediah's gaze moves to the water, his reflection a fractured image. The muscle in his jaw tightens. "When I was a boy," he begins, his voice losing its hard edge, becoming gravelly with old pain. "They took my sister. Sold her, same way. I was too small to stop it." He looks at Alara, and for a moment, the mask is gone. She sees a pain so profound it steals her breath. I swore on her memory I'd never stand by and watch it happen again. The confession is raw, torn from him. It's not a story told for sympathy. It's a wound bared in the quiet of the wilderness. "Did you ever find her?" Alara whispers, her own loss echoing in his. He shakes his head once, a sharp, final gesture. "No, don't." That single word hangs between them, a ghost of shared sorrow. It doesn't create distance. It forges a bond, a silent understanding of what it means to have something precious torn away. Her own rage, which had been a dull ember, now flares. Not at him, but at the world that creates such stories. "I ain't risking anything," Jedediah says as if reading her thoughts. "You were the one on that block who stood there and didn't fall apart. You did the hard part. I just gave him a name they couldn't argue with." She looks down at her hands. They're still trembling, but the frantic energy inside her is beginning to still, to coalesce into something solid. She is not his wife. She is not his lost sister. But today, someone claimed her with something better than money, with action, with honor, with a fierce protective fire that mirrored her own. And maybe, just maybe, with a reason to stand up again. By nightfall, they reach a clearing tucked deep into a grove of pine and cottonwood. A small, rough-hewn cabin stands there, looking as though it grew from the earth itself. It's a one-room shelter with a slanted roof and a porch that creaks a welcome in the evening breeze. The moon, a sliver of silver, rises above the ridge. "I built this," Jedediah says, his voice low. After my sister. Thought if she ever found her way back, she'd need a place to land." Alara hesitates at the threshold. The cabin represents a safety she doesn't feel worthy of. Her dress is a collection of rags. Her body is a map of abuse. "It's yours now," he says, not gently, but with a startling directness. "For as long as you need it." She steps inside. The air smells of cedar, ash, and solitude. A single cot sits against the far wall, a clean wool blanket folded neatly upon it. It is a space untouched by cruelty. She turns to him, the question a stark fear in her eyes. "You're not going to lock the door behind me?" "No," he says, his gaze steady and unwavering. "But there's a bar by the window. If you want to lock it yourself, you do it." That answer stuns her more than a physical blow. Trust, offered so freely, it feels like a trick. He doesn't ask for her gratitude, her story, her submission. He just sees her worth when she had forgotten it existed. She watches him leave, and something inside her that has been frozen for an eternity begins to thaw with a painful ache. When he returns with a pot of stew, the simple, savory smell fills the small room. She whispers, "I don't know how to trust this." Jedediah doesn't look at her. He stirs the pot, his movements slow and deliberate. "You don't have to. Not now. Just eat, rest, heal. That's enough." The stark simplicity of it, the sheer, unadorned decency, almost brings her to tears. They eat in a silence that is no longer charged with unspoken questions, but filled with a quiet, growing companionship. She is not his wife. But tonight, in a cabin built for a ghost, she is no longer for sale, no longer nameless. And as she watches the firelight play across his hard, intense face, she realizes with a jolt that she is no longer alone. And the feeling that sparks in her chest is something far more wild and dangerous than mere gratitude. Section 3. Forging a Life. Elara awakes to birdsong, a sound so alien and beautiful it takes her a moment to place. Sunlight streams through the cracks in the cabin walls, painting stripes of gold across the floor. For the first time in what feels like a lifetime, she wakes on her own terms. No orders barked, no footsteps circling. Just the quiet, steady rhythm of her own breath. The stiffness in her limbs is a brutal reminder, but as she sits up, she feels a fierce possessiveness. This body, bruised and battered as it is hers again. Outside, the steady thwack of an axe splitting wood provides a rhythm for the morning. She rises, steps to the door, and sees him. Jedediah. Sleeves rolled up, sweat lining his brow, methodically turning logs into firewood. He doesn't treat her like a guest or a burden. He doesn't treat her at all, simply exists in the same space, an unspoken acknowledgement of her right to be there. She stands on the porch, a foreign territory. "You sleep?" he asks, not turning, his focus on the axe. "I did," she replies, her voice stronger than the day before. "First real sleep in, I don't know how long." He nods, splitting another log with a clean, satisfying crack. "Good. God. No questions. No pity. Just that." She sits on the top step, the rough wood grounding her. Watching him work is like watching a force of nature. His movements are economical, powerful, almost meditative. Each swing of the axe seems to chip away at the lingering parts of her that still expect chains, that still anticipate cruelty. There is a raw, untamed energy about him, a quiet violence held in perfect check. It's in the tension of his shoulders, the intensity of his focus. It calls to something dormant in her. "Can I help?" she asks, the words surprising herself. Jedediah finally stops, planting the axe in the chopping block. He looks at her, his gaze sharp and assessing. Not questioning if she could, but if she wanted to. Without a word, he walks to the side of the cabin and returns with a small hatchet, handing it to her, handle first. "You split the kindling. Over there." It's not easy. Her arms tremble from misuse, her palms burn, and the hatchet feels clumsy. But each time the blade bites into the wood, each crack and splinter feels like a declaration of independence. I am not the girl in the sack. I am Elara. And Elara can swing an axe. The rhythm becomes her own, a counterpoint to his steady chopping. They work in a shared silence, a team forged in the crucible of a single desperate moment. Later, they drink cool water from the stream, sitting in the shade of the cottonwoods. The air is thick with the scent of pine and their shared labor. "You don't talk much about where you came from," Jedediah says. "It's not a question, just an observation, because it doesn't matter anymore," she replies, her gaze fixed on the water. "That girl, the one they dragged onto that platform, I buried her there." He doesn't argue or push. He just looks at her, a slow, strange smile touching the corner of his mouth. It transforms his harsh features, making him look younger, almost vulnerable. "Then I'm glad I met the one who rose instead." The words hit her like a physical touch, intimate and startling. She blinks against a sudden hot rush of tears, not of sorrow, but of a fierce wild joy. He saw her, not the victim, but the survivor. He saw the fire. That evening, a silent pact is made. He goes to tend a line of snares he set, leaving her the stream and the approaching dusk. She bathes alone, scrubbing her skin with rough soap, washing away not just the dirt, but the shame, the touch of other hands, the memory of being an object. As the first stars blink to life in the purple sky, Alara looks at her reflection in the dark, still water. For the first time, she doesn't flinch. She doesn't see what was done to her. She sees a woman, alive, whole, unbound, free, and a fierce primal desire to live, to truly live, surges through her. The next time they go into town, it isn't a run. Jedediah needs supplies, rope, beams, a new blade for his plow. He doesn't command her to stay. He asks, his voice a low rumble. "You coming?" The question is both an invitation and a challenge. Hide or stand? She looks up from the broom she's using to sweep the porch, her territory. She nods. Yes. She dresses not in defiance, but in dignity. A plain skirt, sleeves rolled high from work, her hair tied back in a knot. The bruises have faded to pale yellow ghosts, but the memory of the sack is a brand on her soul. She mounts the wagon beside Jedediah. When they pass the auction yard, she forces herself to look. The post, the platform, lifeless wood and dirt. It has no power over her now. Heads turn when they enter the general store. Mrs. Calder, the proprietor's wife, stiffens behind the counter, her eyes flicking from Jedediah's imposing form to Alara's calm face. "Good morning," Jedediah says, his voice filling the store, leaving no room for whispers. "Need flour, sugar, and 3 yards of twine. And the lady?" Mrs. Calder asks, forcing a tight, brittle smile. "I'd like some thread," Alara answers, her own voice cool and clear. "And fabric, if you've got something not meant for mourning." The silence in the store is absolute. Then a slow nod from Mrs. Calder. "We might." No one laughs. No one whispers. Because the way Jedediah stands beside her, not in front of her, but with her, is a statement. His presence is a shield, his gaze a warning. This woman is not alone. This woman will not be touched. As they leave, Alara notices the baker's wife in her doorway, the same woman who had bit on her with cold, practical cruelty. Now that woman's eyes drop to the dusty street. Power has shifted. On the ride back, the wagon rolling through the golden afternoon light, Jedediah hands her a small, paper-wrapped parcel. "Picked this up when you weren't looking." She opens it. Inside, nestled on a bed of cotton, is a thin silver comb. It is not ornate, but solid, real, gel, simple, beautiful. The weight of it in her palm is the weight of a gesture she cannot comprehend. "Why?" she whispers, her voice thick. He doesn't look at her, his eyes on the trail ahead. "Because when you walked into that store today," he says, his voice a low growl, "you didn't look afraid. That deserves something." She doesn't cry. She runs her fingers over the smooth, cool metal, a talisman against the ghosts of her past. She is a woman in her own skin, a woman who no longer needs to be claimed, but who allows herself to stand beside a man who chose her without possession. As the wagon rolls toward the cabin, their cabin, she feels a fierce, protective love for this harsh, beautiful land and for the silent, intense man beside her. It is a love as wild and untamed as the frontier itself, a passion born not of softness, but of shared fire and defiant strength. Section 4. The Ghost of the Past. A week later, the past comes riding up the trail. Alara is hauling buckets from the stream, the muscles in her back and shoulders burning with the satisfying ache of hard work when she spots the dust. Then, the glint of a polished silver belt buckle, ridiculously out of place in the wilderness. Jedediah is in the small garden patch they had cleared, his back to the trail, She doesn't call for him. She doesn't run. She sets the buckets down, straightens her spine, and waits. The man who approaches is young, dressed in a tailored city coat, a smirk plastered on his face. He reeks of smug authority. He is not here by accident. "Afternoon," he says, his voice smooth as oiled leather. "This, the Ward homestead?" Alara nods once, her face a neutral mask. "Who's asking?" "Name's Lyle," he says, drawing the name out. "I work for a man who remembers you, a Mr. Abernathy." The name means nothing, yet everything. The man who bought the bill of sale. Her throat tightens, but she keeps her voice steady. "Then he should have remembered I don't belong to him anymore." Lyle chuckles, a condescending sound that grates on her nerves. He leans forward in his fancy saddle. "You see, that's the thing about property, little lady. He says you left owing him something. Claims he paid good money for you." Alara doesn't blink. A cold, clear rage settles in her. He bought silence, obedience, and a girl with no choices. None of that is for sale anymore. Lyle tilts his head, his smirk faltering slightly. "Brave talk. You think that cowboy behind the axe can protect you forever?" His eyes flick toward the garden. "He didn't save me," she says, the words ringing with the absolute conviction of truth. "I did that." Lyle is taken aback. Not by the words, but by the sheer unshakable force with which she says them. There is no tremble in her voice, no hesitation, only steel. Jedediah appears then, silent as a shadow, a hoe held loosely in one hand. He moves with a predator's grace, positioning himself between Lyle and the cabin. "You're trespassing," he says, his voice flat and cold as river stone. "And if you're threatening her, you're not leaving with your boots." The air crackles with tension. Lyle glances between them, weighing the odds. He sees a determined woman and a man who looks like he was carved from the mountain itself. A man who looks like he could kill him with a garden tool and not lose a moment of sleep. Alara steps forward, reclaiming the confrontation. Her eyes lock with Lyle's. "Tell your Mr. Abernathy that if he wants something from me, he can come ask for it himself. But I will not be gagged, leashed, or covered again. I know who I am now." The passion in her voice is a living flame. It's the fire Jedediah saw in her from the very beginning. Lyle, unnerved, pulls his reins, his bravado crumbling. "You'll regret talking like that." "No," she says, her voice clear and carrying in the quiet air. "I regret not saying it sooner." He spurs his horse, kicking up dust as he retreats down the trail, a coward in fine clothes. Alara stands there, chest rising and falling, the adrenaline coursing through her. She stood her ground. She spoke her truth. She defended her home. Jedediah comes to stand beside her. He doesn't touch her, but his presence is a solid wall at her back. A rare, quiet smile touches his lips. "You didn't need me," he says, a note of deep pride in his voice. "Not this time." She turns to him, her eyes blazing with a fierce emotion. "I needed you to stand behind me." She corrects him softly. "Not in front of me." His smile widens. He understands. It isn't about him being her protector. It's about them being partners. A fortress of two against the world. That night, they sit on the porch under a sky bruised with the colors of sunset. The air is still and charged. She doesn't need to be held or comforted. She needs the space to feel the power of what she's done, to remember the voice she had buried, and to know, beyond any doubt, that it would never go silent again. The silence between them stretches, but it's a new kind of silence. Comfortable, intimate. He looks at her, his dark eyes tracing the lines of her face in the fading light. The air grows thick, heavy with unspoken words, with the raw, undeniable pull that has been arching between them since the moment he claimed her. He reaches out, his calloused fingers hesitating for a fraction of a second before gently brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. The touch is electric. It's not a gesture of comfort, but of desire. A spark in the tinder dry wilderness of their shared solitude. She doesn't pull away. She leans into his touch, her eyes closing for a moment. It is a surrender not of her will, but to the wild, fierce current flowing between them. He is the man who saw her fire, and she is the woman who is not afraid of his darkness. On the creaking porch of a cabin built for a ghost, under a sky full of stars, their silent, ferocious love finally finds its voice. Not in words, but in a shared look that promises a future as wild and unpredictable as their beginning. Section 5. Building a home. The summer deepens, the days long and golden, bleeding into warm, star-dusted nights. The life Alara is living is one she had never dared to imagine. She wakes with the sun and works until her muscles ache, not from coercion, but from choice. Every nail she hammers into a loose floorboard, every seed she plants in their expanding garden, rewrites the story of her body. It is no longer a vessel for pain and shame, but an instrument of creation and strength. Her hands, once bound and bruised, now mend the roof with Jedediah, stitch curtains from old grain sacks, and carve a small, intricate flower into the wooden frame of the window. When she cuts her palm one morning on a splintered plank, she doesn't cry out. She looks at the bright bead of blood welling up and feels a strange, fierce pride. This pain is honest. It is not punishment, but proof of life, of work, of building something that is hers. The cabin transforms under their combined efforts. It ceases to be just a shelter and becomes a home. A real home. The unspoken tension between them has also transformed. The charged silence has given way to an easy companionship, punctuated by shared glances and low, private conversations. The wild passion that sparked between them on the porch has settled into a deep, burning fire, a constant source of warmth and light in their secluded world. It's in the way he brings her a wildflower from the woods, leaving it on the table without a word. It's in the way she saves him the best piece of rabbit from the stew. It's a love language built of actions, not pronouncements. One evening, she prepares dinner alone while he mends a broken fence line. Rabbit stew, fresh bread made with her own hands, and wild greens she'd learned to identify. When Jedediah comes in, covered in the dust and sweat of the day, he stops at the threshold. The cabin is filled with the warm, savory smell of food. A clean cloth is on the table. It is the picture of a home. "You've done all this," he says, his voice rough with an emotion he rarely shows. She nods, wiping her hands on her apron. "You don't have to cook every night," he says, stepping inside. "I know. Then why do you?" She looks at him, her gaze direct and unflinching. "Because it's the first time in my life I've ever made something that stayed mine when it was finished." He doesn't speak. He just sits at the table, and as he eats the food she prepared and the home they are building, something profound settles between them. It is more than respect, more than passion. It is the quiet, unbreakable bond of two people who have found their other half in the most unlikely of places. Later that week, their neighbor, Mabel, rides by. An older woman with sharp eyes and a sharper tongue. She's heard the rumors. The auctioned girl, the silent man, the defiant stand. She arrives bearing a basket of eggs and a healthy dose of suspicion. Alara, unintimidated, serves her tea on the porch. Mabel's questions are direct, probing. Alara answers each one with quiet, unshakable strength. Finally, Mabel gets to the heart of it. "And you two?" she asks, her eyes narrowing. "You're married then. The preacher ain't been up this way." Alara doesn't look at Jedediah, who is sitting on the porch steps, sharpening a knife, a silent, watchful presence. She meets Mabel's gaze head-on. "We're building something," she says simply. "Name or not, it's real." Mabel sips her tea, studying Alara over the rim of the cup. After a long moment, she sets the cup down with a decisive click. "You speak like someone who earned her place." "I didn't earn it," Alara replies, her voice soft but firm. "I reclaimed it." A slow smile spreads across Mabel's weathered face. When she leaves, she glances back once. "Some women take years to find their spine," she calls out. "You seem to have stitched yours back together with iron thread." Alara doesn't reply. She doesn't need to. That night, as she washes the dishes by lantern light, she sees her reflection in the dark glass of the cabin window. She sees not the ghost she once was, but a woman standing in her own home, her back straight, her chin lifted, her hands marked by effort, not violence. She is no one's property, no one's secret. She is Alara Ward, not by law or by preacher, but by the undeniable truth of the life she has forged. And every beam of that cabin, every stone in the hearth, now carries her name. Section 6. Breaking the cycle. It's the first Sunday she's returned to town since the day with Lyle. This time is different. No sack, no escort, no fear. Just her. Hair braided tight with the silver comb Jedediah gave her tucked into the knot. Not for show, but as a private symbol of her worth. She walks beside him, not in his shadow, but step for step. An equal, a partner, and everyone sees it. At the general store, conversations pause. Voices lower. A few people who once would have sneered now offer polite, hesitant nods, but Alara isn't here for their approval. She is here for thread, for sugar, for the simple freedom of moving through the world unashamed. She is here to be seen, standing upright, where she once knelt in shame. As they load the wagon, Jedediah asks gently, "You want to stop at the chapel?" She looks at the small, whitewashed building at the end of the street, a place of public declarations and blessings. She feels his unspoken question. He would give her that, a public name, a ceremony, if she wanted it. She reaches out, her hand covering his on the wagon rail. A simple, public touch that speaks volumes. "Not yet," she says, her voice full of a love that needs no audience. "I don't need their blessing to know I'm whole." He nods, his hand turning to clasp hers. Just as they turn to leave, shouting erupts down the road. A commotion by the old defunct auction post. A young girl, barely 16, is being dragged by the arm by a large, brutish man. She doesn't scream. She stumbles, her face a mask of defeated terror, as if screaming has been punished out of her too many times. A cold, familiar rage floods Alara. Before Jedediah can even move, she is off the wagon, walking with a calm, deliberate purpose that parts the gathering crowd. She steps directly into the man's path. "That girl's not yours," she says, her voice flat and deadly. The man, startled, laughs a foul, whiskey-soaked laugh. "And who the hell are you to say? You think she wants your kind of help?" "I don't think," Alara replies, her eyes boring into him. "I remember." She turns her gaze to the girl, her voice softening, but losing none of its strength. "Do you want to leave with him?" The girl blinks, her lips trembling, unsure if the question is even allowed. Hope and fear war in her wide eyes. She looks at Alara, at her strong stance, her unshakable calm, and a flicker of courage ignites. She gives a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. "No, but..." "You heard her," Alara says to the man. The man lunges, not for the girl, but for Alara. But Jedediah is suddenly there, a silent, immovable wall of muscle and menace. "You'll want to think twice," he says, his voice a low, deadly growl, his hand hovering near the pistol at his belt. The new town deputy appears, pushing through the crowd. "Everything all right here. She's not his," Alara says, her voice ringing with authority. The girl, Anna, now clings to her arm. The deputy looks from Alara's resolute face to the girl's terrified one, then to the man's bruised ego boiling in his red face. He makes his decision. Then she walks away. The lawman says, his voice final. And he rides out, now. And just like that, another life is reclaimed. Back at the cabin, Anna barely speaks, but her actions are a language of their own. She helps chop carrots, fetches water, and stares at Alara as if she is something miraculous. That night, as the fire crackles and the vast starry sky stretches above them, Jedediah turns to Alara. They are sitting on the porch, Anna sleeping safely inside. "You didn't wait for someone to choose for you this time," he says, his voice full of a deep, quiet awe. Alara smiles, a real, radiant smile that lights up her face. "Because I finally realized I was never waiting to be chosen," she says, her voice resonating with the power of her journey. I was just waiting to choose myself. In that moment, with the quiet flicker of firelight on her skin and a young girl safe inside their home, Alara knows the cycle is broken. 'Cause she broke it. With nothing but her voice, her will, and the fierce wild love of a man who saw her not as a woman to be saved, but as a fire to stand beside. The cabin isn't grand, but it is more than a home now. It is a sanctuary, a beginning. Years later, they would say the woman who lived in that cabin helped rewrite the laws of the frontier, not with a pen, but with her spirit. One day, Mabel arrives with news and a loaf of fresh bread. A new territorial law has been passed. No more human auctions. Not because of one protest, but because the silent complicity had been shattered by too many women like Alara who stood up, who refused to be unnamed, and who burned down the silence that protected such cruelty. They talk about you in town, you know, Mabel says, placing the loaf on the table. Say you started something. Alara just shrugs, a small smile playing on her lips. I didn't start it. I just refused to be ended. That night, Jedediah carves a new piece of wood. When Alara sees it, she freezes. He's made a sign to hang over their gate. It reads, "The Ward Place, home of the woman who wasn't bought." She touches the letters, her fingers trembling. "It's too much," she whispers. He comes to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her back against his solid chest. "It's the truth," he replies, his voice a low rumble against her ear. Let them see it. And when they tell her story now, they don't start with the sack. They start with the moment she claimed her own life, and in doing so became not just a survivor, but a legend. A testament to the fact that even in the harshest wilderness, the most powerful force is a human spirit that refuses to be broken, and a love that is brave enough to be free. The story of Alara and Jedediah is more than a tale of survival. It's a lesson etched into the heart of the Wild West. That true strength isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act in spite of it. True freedom isn't a gift granted by others, but a right reclaimed by the sheer force of one's own will. Their story teaches us that a person's worth is not determined by the price they might fetch, but by the courage in their soul. In a world that will always try to put a price on us, to label us, to put us in a box, the most defiant act is to simply stand up, and in doing so, build a home within ourselves, a sanctuary that no one can ever buy or sell. They remind us that the greatest legends are not born from power or wealth, but from the quiet, unbreakable dignity of the human heart. Thank you for joining us on Wild West Stories. If this story moved you, please honor its spirit by subscribing to our channel, liking this video, and sharing it with others who appreciate tales of true grit.